Footprints in the frozen wind. The wind howled like a hungry beast. Snow flew across the sky, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. Kyle, a human explorer from Earth, wrapped his coat tighter around his body. The storm on this alien planet was stronger than any snowstorm he had ever seen before. He looked down at his scanner. The machine blinked red. "Life sign detected," it said in a robotic voice. Kyle stopped walking. Life? Out here? In this death storm? He looked ahead. His eyes squinted through the falling snow. Then he saw it, small footprints in the white ground. They were not human. The toes were long and the heels barely touched the snow. "Someone small," he whispered. "And light." He bent down, touched the print. It was still warm. Whoever made it had passed here only moments ago. A soft sound floated through the wind. It was weak, but Kyle heard it. Crying. He stood up quickly and followed the sound. Each step was harder than the last. The snow hit his face like tiny knives. His boots sank deep, but he kept going. The crying grew louder. Then he saw her. A small figure sat against a broken rock. She had purple skin, large glowing eyes, and strange ridges on her cheeks. Her thin arms hugged her knees. She was shaking badly. Her tiny body was almost buried in snow. Her tears were freezing on her face. Kyle's heart ached. She looked up and gasped when she saw him. She tried to stand, but her legs gave out. She was too cold, too weak. Kyle took off his thick outer coat and wrapped it around her. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'm not here to hurt you." She didn't understand his words, but she stared into his eyes. Her fear began to fade. Kyle picked her up gently. She was so light, like a bird made of ice. Her skin was freezing. He could feel her tiny heartbeat, slow and faint. "We need shelter," he muttered, looking around. He checked his map. A small cave system was marked nearby. If they could reach it, they might survive. Suddenly, the ground shook slightly. Kyle froze. Another sound joined the wind. Not crying, not human. Something low, like growling. He turned his head. Far in the distance, shapes moved in the snow. Large shapes, crawling, shifting. Eyes glowed red for a second. Then they vanished into the storm. Kyle didn't wait. He held the alien child close and started walking fast. The storm was growing stronger. Snow hit harder. But Kyle didn't stop. He could feel the child's breath on his neck. Cold. Weak. "I won't let you die," he whispered. The wind screamed louder. The shapes were getting closer. He could feel it. The girl let out a soft sound, a word in her alien language. It sounded like Mira. Kyle nodded. "Okay, Mira. Stay with me." He found the mouth of the cave just as the storm grew wild. Snow and wind whipped behind him like claws. He ducked inside and placed Mira gently on the ground. The cave was cold but dry. Safe. For now. Kyle started a small heat lamp and placed it near her. Her body slowly stopped shaking. Her eyes blinked. She looked at him, confused, but not afraid. Kyle gave her a protein bar. She sniffed it, then took a tiny bite. He smiled. "Good girl." Outside, something growled again, louder this time. Kyle looked toward the cave entrance. The storm wasn't just a storm. Something else was out there, something hunting. He sat beside Mira and took out his plasma gun. Whatever came next. He was ready to protect her, even if it meant dying in the snow. Something hunts in the blizzard. The storm howled outside the cave like it was alive. Inside, Kyle sat quietly beside the alien child. She had fallen asleep, curled up under his thick coat. Her name was Mira. She looked peaceful now, but he remembered her frozen tears and the red eyes in the snow. He kept his plasma gun on his lap, eyes on the dark entrance of the cave. Then, snap, sound from deep inside the cave. Kyle turned fast, heart racing. The sound didn't come from outside. It came from behind him. He stood up slowly. The cave wasn't just a small space. It went deeper, into the dark. The light from his heat lamp couldn't reach the end. He picked up a glow stick and cracked it. Pale green light filled the air. He moved forward, step by step, deeper into the cave. Another sound, soft scraping, like claws on stone. Then he saw its scratches on the cave wall. Fresh. Deep. His breath turned cold. This cave wasn't empty. It never was. Kyle backed away, but then he heard Mira cry out. He ran back. She was awake, her eyes wide with fear, her tiny hand pointed toward the cave entrance. Kyle spun around. A tall shadow stood at the edge of the cave. Its body was thin and long. Icy crystals clung to its arms. Its face was hidden in the snow, but red eyes glowed. The creature stepped forward, slow and silent. Mira whimpered. Kyle raised his gun. "Don't come closer." The creature didn't stop. Kyle fired a warning shot. A flash of light burned the cave wall beside it. Still, the creature kept walking. Suddenly, more red eyes appeared behind the first. 2, 3, 4. They were surrounding the cave. Not beasts. Hunters. Kyle backed up. "Mira, stay behind me." The child crawled toward him, trembling. Kyle checked his gun, only 6 shots left. Then something strange happened. The creatures stopped. They sniffed the air. One of them made a strange clicking sound. Then all of them turned and disappeared into the storm again. Kyle didn't lower his weapon. He waited. Nothing moved. Then, slowly, he sat down. Why did they leave? Mira crawled closer. She reached into her tunic and pulled out something glowing. It was a small crystal, blue and warm. She placed it in Kyle's hand. The moment he touched it, images flashed in his mind, memories that were not his. He saw a tall alien woman running through the snow. He saw Mira crying as machines crashed from the sky. He saw those same red-eyed creatures, but they were not always beasts. They were created, built. Mira's people made them, but something went wrong. Kyle opened his eyes, gasping. He stared at the crystal. "You're not just a lost child," he said softly. "You're the reason they're hunting." Mira looked at him. Her eyes were sad. Kyle stood up. "We have to move. This cave won't stay safe." He looked outside. The storm still raged, but he could see more clearly now. He made a quick plan. A research outpost was a few miles east. If they made it there, he could call for help. He picked Mira up, wrapped her in the coat again, and stepped into the wind. This time the storm didn't feel empty. He knew what was out there, and they knew him now too. The frozen cave of secrets. Snow blasted against Kyle's face as he pushed forward, each step slow and heavy. Mira was asleep again in his arms, her head resting against his shoulder. The wind screamed like a warning. Something deep inside told him they were being watched again. The world around them was white and endless, until he saw a jagged line across the snow, a deep crack in the ice. Kyle stopped. A narrow gap split the ground in front of him. It was almost hidden under layers of snow, but it led to a dark tunnel below. He looked around. There was no better shelter. And the creatures, they could return at any moment. He made a decision. He climbed down. The opening led to a cavern of glowing ice. Blue light reflected off the walls like glass. The air was still and cold, but peaceful. Mira opened her eyes and looked around in wonder. Kyle placed her down gently. "We'll rest here a bit." As she sat, her small fingers touched the icy wall. Suddenly symbols lit up, strange alien writing that glowed like fire under the ice. Kyle stepped back. "What is this place?" Mira stood slowly. Her hand moved across the glowing runes. She closed her eyes. The wall responded. A pulse of light filled the cave, and then the floor below them shifted. Kyle grabbed Mira just as a section of the ice gave way, and they slid down a tunnel of smooth, glowing stone. They landed hard in a deeper chamber. Kyle groaned and stood, checking Mira first. She was okay. Shaken, but not hurt. But then he looked up and froze. In the center of the chamber were frozen bodies, tall, elegant beings with smooth faces and soft, glowing skin, all of them encased in clear ice. Their expressions were calm, peaceful, as if sleeping. Mira walked toward one of them, her hands pressed against the ice. She whispered something. Kyle realized this wasn't just any cave. It was a crypt. No, a temple. One of the frozen beings had markings on its clothes, gold symbols like the ones Mira touched. Kyle stepped forward. "Is that your family?" Mira nodded. Her lip trembled. She turned back to Kyle and pointed to the wall. Another set of runes began to glow. They moved, like light flowing through water. Kyle watched. Images filled the air, holograms of war, metal ships falling from the sky, alien cities burning in snowstorms, the red-eyed creatures marching through fire. The message was clear. Mira's people didn't die from nature. They were attacked. The storm, the monsters. It was all created, a machine, a weapon, built to protect. But it turned against them. Kyle clenched his fists. That storm, it's not just a storm. It's a prison, a trap. He walked around the chamber, shining his flashlight on the walls. More signs, more secrets. Then he saw it, a console, old, dusty, and half buried in the snow. He brushed off the ice and found a power slot. He pulled a battery from his gear and plugged it in. The machine hummed to life. A deep, low sound echoed through the cave, and one of the frozen bodies began to move. Ice cracked. The figure inside opened its glowing eyes. Kyle raised his weapon, unsure. But Mira ran forward. The figure inside the ice reached out and placed a hand on the glass. Kyle stepped closer. It was a woman. Her face looked like Mira's. Older, wiser. Kyle understood. Mira's mother. The cave shook. Above, something had found them. The red-eyed creatures. They were coming. Kyle pulled Mira back. He looked at the waking alien woman still trapped in the ice. "I'll come back," he said. Then, holding Mira tight, he ran back up the tunnel, toward the storm. Outside, the wind screamed louder than before, but Kyle's eyes burned with purpose. Now he knew the truth, and someone had to stop what was coming. Trapped beneath the ice, Kyle ran. Snow slapped his face like fire. Mira clung tightly to his chest, her little hands gripping his jacket. The cave behind them rumbled. Something huge was coming, something alive. But Kyle didn't look back. Ahead was nothing but white. Then, crack. The ground opened, the ice broke like glass beneath Kyle's boots. He slipped, fell, and vanished into the frozen world below. When he hit the bottom, everything went silent. No storm, no growling, just cold. Kyle groaned. Pain stabbed his shoulder, but nothing felt broken. He blinked his eyes open. Blue light filled the space around him. He had fallen into another chamber, deeper than the last one. He looked around. Mira. A soft sound answered him. She was lying nearby, crying softly, but okay. Kyle crawled to her and hugged her tight. "I've got you." Then he saw something in the ice. Figures. Frozen, yes, but not the same as before. These ones looked different. Their faces were sharp, their armor was jagged, their claws, long. Kyle stood slowly. The frozen warriors around him weren't like Mira's people. These ones were built for war. A symbol was etched on their chests, the same one he had seen on the creatures outside. The red-eyed hunters. And suddenly, he understood. "They're not animals," he whispered. "They're soldiers. But why were they here, frozen?" As he moved closer, his boot kicked something, a metal panel. He bent down. A shattered screen blinked under snow. Mira walked to him and placed her crystal on the panel. It came alive. A voice echoed through the chamber, soft and deep. The alien language translated slowly through Kyle's scanner. Containment breach. Lockdown failed. Generators damaged, soldiers frozen to prevent rebellion. Kyle's blood turned to ice. These things weren't just weapons. They had once followed orders, and now they were waking up. He turned to Mira. "We're standing in a prison." Suddenly, a loud bang shook the chamber. One of the frozen warriors twitched, a second bang, then a crack. Kyle grabbed Mira and stepped back fast. One of the creatures, 3 meters tall, covered in frost, opened its glowing red eyes. It broke through the ice with a horrible scream. Kyle fired. The plasma bolt hit the creature's chest, but it didn't stop. It roared and charged. Kyle ran. He ducked behind a pillar of ice, panting. "We need a way out." Mira tapped the ground. The light from her crystal lit up a symbol on the floor. The floor shook. A path opened beneath their feet. A slide of ice. Kyle didn't think. He jumped in, holding Mira close. They slid down fast, spinning through tunnels of frozen stone. The creature's screams echoed behind them. Then, daylight. They shot out of a crack in the cliffside and fell into the snow below. Kyle hit the ground hard, rolling. Mira tumbled beside him. They were outside again, but the storm was quieter now. The wind had stopped. Kyle stood, coughing. Then he saw it. In the distance, on a hill, stood a tall black tower. It wasn't natural. It was metal, alien, humming, and the clouds around it swirled like a storm's heart. "That's it," Kyle whispered. "The storm machine." Mira looked at it too. She said one word. "Endor." Kyle didn't know what it meant, but he knew one thing. If they didn't destroy that tower, no one would survive and the red-eyed army would rise again. The storm is alive. The wind didn't blow from the sky. It breathed from the tower. Kyle stared at the massive black structure ahead. It rose like a spear through the ice clouds, humming with power. The storm clouds spun around it, pulled by something, inside, something unnatural. Mira stood beside him, her small hand clutched tightly in his. Her crystal pulsed blue in her palm. "This is where it started," Kyle whispered, "and maybe where it ends." Snowflakes didn't fall near the tower. They danced in slow circles as if the air itself was confused. The silence was worse than the storm, too quiet, like the world was holding its breath. Kyle checked his gear. His last battery was half full. His gun had 2 plasma charges left, not enough for a fight, but maybe enough for a plan. Mira tugged his coat. She pointed at the base of the tower. Kyle lifted his binoculars. There, half buried under ice, was a control panel, a hatch. Away, inside, but standing around it, 3 red-eyed creatures, tall, still, waiting. Guards. Kyle crouched lower. "We'll have to be smart." Mira pulled something from her tunic. A second crystal, red this time. She held it up. The red glow pulsed, in rhythm with the tower. The guards shifted, their heads turned toward her. Kyle panicked. "No, wait!" But the guards didn't attack. They stepped aside. Mira walked forward slowly, the red crystal in her hands like a key. The hatch hissed open. Kyle followed fast. Inside, the walls were made of smooth black metal. Symbols glowed along the floor, showing Mira the path. The tower wasn't just a machine, it was a heart, and it was still beating. The lower levels pulsed with power. Sparks flew from broken wires. Machines hummed in strange patterns. The air was warm here, almost alive. Kyle's boots echoed in the silence. Mira walked ahead, sure and calm. She stopped at a central platform. In the middle of it, an alien control core. It floated, humming, with a bright beam connecting it to the ceiling. Storm clouds rumbled above them. Mira looked up, her eyes filled with sadness. "This created everything," Kyle said. "The storm, the creatures, the war." Mira stepped forward and touched the core with both hands. The room exploded with light. Images filled the air. Memories. Her people creating the tower to protect their home. But something went wrong. The storm became too strong. The Guardians turned into hunters. The machine stopped listening, and the people who created it were killed by their own defense. The tower had become a god of cold. Kyle stepped closer. "Can you stop it?" Mira nodded once. Her crystal began to glow brighter, but then, screech, a red-eyed creature crashed through the ceiling, bigger than the others, covered in armor. Its claws sparked against the floor, the final Guardian. It roared. Kyle fired his last 2 plasma shots. Both hit, but the beast kept coming. It knocked Kyle back with one massive swing. He hit the wall hard, dazed. The creature turned toward Mira. She stood firm. The red crystal pulsed like a heartbeat. The creature growled, but then stopped. Its head twitched. It looked confused. Then, slowly, it knelt before her. Kyle stared, wide-eyed. She commands them now. Mira touched its head gently. Then she turned to the control core. With both hands, she lifted the red and blue crystals and pressed them into the machine. The lights flickered. The hum turned into a scream. The tower began to shake. Storm clouds broke apart like shattered glass. Snow turned to soft mist. The wind stopped. The storm was dead. Outside, the skies cleared for the first time in years. Sunlight touched the frozen land. Kyle stepped out of the tower, Mira beside him. The final Guardian followed like a silent protector. He looked down at the child and smiled. "You did it." Mira said nothing, but she looked up at the sun, and for the first time, she smiled back. One man against the ice, the storm was gone, but the cold was not. Kyle stood on the edge of the broken tower, looking over the white, endless land. The sky was clear now and the sun peeked through weak and pale, but it was there. Mira stood beside him. Her small fingers held tightly onto his hand. Behind them, the great machine that once controlled the storm had gone silent. Dead. But their journey wasn't over. Kyle took out his signal beacon. It blinked red. No response. The tower's collapse had destroyed the signal system. They couldn't call for help. Not yet. Mira pointed to the mountains far away. Kyle nodded. The outpost. The human research station, built years ago, was still out there, buried in the snow. If it still worked, it had communication systems strong enough to call a ship. It was 30 miles away. No vehicles, no shelter, no backup. Just one man, one child, and the frozen planet in between. Kyle looked down at her. "Let's go." The wind blew soft now, but the snow was deep. Every step was a fight. Kyle carried Mira most of the way. Her legs were too small, her body too tired. He wrapped her in both coats, keeping her warm with his own body heat. He didn't speak much. He couldn't. Breathing was hard. Time passed. His legs hurt. His hands were going numb, but he didn't stop. At night, they found a crack in the rocks and made a fire from old fuel sticks. Mira slept beside him. Kyle stayed awake, gun in hand, eyes on the dark. The storm was gone, but not everything on this planet had vanished. There were still things in the snow, watching, waiting. On the third day, Kyle collapsed. His body gave out. He hit the snow hard. Mira still in his arms, his lips were cracked, his vision was blurry. "I can't." Mira crawled free. She reached into her coat, pulled out the last crystal. This one glowed white. She placed it on Kyle's chest. It sank into his armor and pulsed. Warmth filled his body. His eyes opened wide. Air rushed into his lungs. "What was that?" he gasped. Mira smiled weakly. "Life stone." Kyle sat up. Pain still burned, but he could move again. He carried her again. One step, then another, and another. On the fourth day, he saw it. A tower, metal, cracked, but standing. The outpost. He laughed. He cried. He ran. The doors were frozen shut. He punched the code into the keypad. Lights flickered. The door opened with a long hiss. Warm air rushed out. He stepped inside, dropped to his knees. He was safe. They were safe. Inside, the station still had power. Old messages blinked on dusty screens. Kyle walked to the console and sent a signal. Human survivor. Child found. Emergency rescue needed. He hit send. Mira walked up beside him. She looked out the window. Outside, the final red-eyed guardian stood far away. It watched the horizon, then turned and walked into the snow. Gone. Kyle sank into a chair. He looked at Mira. "You did all of this." She looked up, eyes glowing soft. She said one word. "Together." Kyle smiled. For the first time in days, he let himself rest. Above them, the stars began to shine, and somewhere far away, a rescue ship turned toward their signal. Warmth returns, and so does hope. The stars were no longer hidden. They burned brightly over the frozen world, shining through a clear sky for the first time in years. Inside the outpost, Kyle woke to a sound he hadn't heard in days. A voice. "Rescue vessel inbound. Coordinates locked." He blinked. For a moment he thought it was a dream. Then he saw Mira sitting by the window, watching the sky with quiet eyes. A faint smile touched her lips. The station lights flickered as old systems came back online. Kyle checked the screen. ETA. 1 hour. Just one more hour, and they would be free. He walked over to Mira and sat beside her. "You hear that?" he asked softly. "We're going home." Mira didn't speak, but her small hand reached out and took his. Kyle looked out the window. Snow still covered everything. But it wasn't the same. It didn't feel like death anymore. It felt like silence after a long scream. They spent the next hour in the warmth of the control room. Kyle made food from the emergency supplies. Mira nibbled on a nutrition bar. She had never tasted chocolate before. Her eyes lit up in surprise. Kyle laughed. "Yeah, it's sweet. I'll get you more when we get back." Mira pointed to a picture on the wall, an old photo of Earth. Blue oceans, green lands, white clouds. She tilted her head. "Home?" Kyle nodded. "Yeah, that's where I come from." She looked back at him, then pointed to herself. "Home?" He paused, then touched his chest. "With me." She smiled. The ship arrived, like a falling star. It cut through the sky, fire trailing behind its sleek silver body. It landed softly on the ice near the outpost. The doors opened. 3 humans in rescue suits stepped out. Their eyes widened when they saw Mira. Kyle walked toward them, Mira in his arms, her face tucked into his shoulder. One of the officers raised a scanner. "Is she alien?" Kyle nodded. "Yes, her name is Mira. She looks unharmed." "She saved my life," Kyle said. "And a lot more." The officer looked around. "This planet, it's changing." Kyle looked back at the sky. "No, it's healing." Inside the ship, Mira sat by a wide window watching the planet grow smaller as they lifted off. Her hand pressed gently against the glass. Kyle sat beside her. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, but her eyes were full of memories. The tower. The frozen people. Her mother still trapped in ice. Kyle placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll go back one day, I promise." She leaned against him, her tiny voice soft. Together. Back on Earth, the news of Kyle's survival and the child he rescued shook the world. Scientists asked questions, military leaders made plans, But Kyle said only one thing at the press briefing. She's not a weapon. She's a survivor. Mira stood beside him in a simple blue dress holding his hand. The cameras flashed, but her eyes stayed on him. Because she didn't care about the world. She cared about the man who had walked through a storm to carry her out. Years later, a child laughed under Earth's warm sun. She ran through green fields, barefoot, happy. Her skin glowed softly in the light. Her eyes sparkled like stars. A human man sat nearby, watching with a smile. Kyle, he waved at her. Be careful, the maïs. Child turned back and waved. Mira groaned, smiling. Alive. The storm had ended. But the warmth had only just begun. The end.